Okay, well, welcome to today's talk. Memoirs of a Mystic in Training is almost out, and this is the lady that's been behind the lady that wrote the book. So I just want to introduce everyone to lovely Katie, who has been my editor for the last and book coach for the last year. So hello, Katie.
Hello, Melissa. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure. It's been a journey, my darling, hasn't it? So for the very least.
It's been a journey, and to be honest, it was a year ago, that I messaged you. It was almost exactly a year ago that I messaged you and said, Katie, I've just written a Facebook post, and do you think this is the start of a book? Do you remember that?
I remember it very well. Absolutely. Bless you. You were so doubting yourself and questioning yourself. And I read it and I was like, what's the problem here? Like, this is amazing. Like, yes, absolutely. Like, are you crazy? You're an amazing writer. Like, this has to start a book, right?
And that is, I just got goosebumps. And that is exactly how the book starts. That post, which was actually an inspiration from a friend of mine, Cece, who asked me once what inspires me. She said, what inspires you? And I was like, no, she said, what were your achievements? What have been your achievements in your life? And it got me thinking, like, what have I achieved? And I started to think about all the things that I could classify as achievements, the certifications and, the things that had happened and the people that I'd worked with and the things that I'd done. And I was kind of like listing all of these things out, thinking, well, they don't have any feeling behind it, they don't have any energy behind it. And as I'm listing it all out, I was like, it's not the thing, it's the thing behind the thing that happened. And I remember speaking to you and going, I don't know where to start. And you were like, just open your laptop and start. And so I got that post and I kind of rewrote it a little different. And then I didn't stop writing for like 2 months or however long it was.
Pretty much, yeah. It was like once we opened that floodgate, there really was no stopping you. Like, it was just pouring out of you. Yeah. It was all, I mean, obviously we've been through some changes and some edits, which is natural in writing the book, but actually all of the real foundation of it was just sitting there waiting to come out. And of course, because it's your story, right? Like, which in some aspects is easier to write because of course you've been through it and you know it all. But on the other side of it, it's harder to write because you have an emotional reaction to everything that you're writing. So it's making sure that it's coming out in the most authentic, honest way, really, I suppose.
Yeah. It's funny because when I was writing it, I was like, well, this never has to go anywhere. I can write it and it can just stay on my laptop forever and ever, and no one ever needs to see it. And I think, when I did the first edit of that, it was quite obvious at the beginning of the book how different it was as it got towards the end of the book, because I was quite in my head about it. I was like, oh, well, how is this going to be and how's this going to come across, and what do I write and what comes in, and you say, oh, like, I'm a good writer, I'm used to writing on Facebook and these kind of short little things, but in those cases I'm quite in control. I'm like, well, this is what wants to come through. I've got a main message. It's like, it's all quite safe, even though I've been pushing the boundaries of what I post on Facebook for the last few years. It's like, it's still quite safe. It can always be deleted. It's only my friends or my followers or the people that are on there that are going to see it. But when it came to the book, like, I knew that there was something in there that was in my power. I knew that this was going to be something. I knew that this was something that had been like rising up in me for so long, and I'd been stopping myself. So when I opened the laptop and you gave me the best advice, you were like, just write and don't edit it, just write. And I was like, okay, I'll just write. And I remember thinking, well, no one has to see this. Like, apart from you.
I mean, it is the best advice. You know, if anybody is ever thinking about writing anything, I always say to people, look, the first draft, the first go at it, you are literally just putting sand in a bucket. That's literally what you're doing. Like, you can edit the sand into a sandcastle. We can craft it afterwards, but nobody can edit a blank page. You have to have something to work with. And what's really interesting about, some people can do it. You know, I say to people, don't edit as you write that first draft, because well, essentially what it is that you're using two different parts of your brain.
Right.
So your creative flow is one aspect, but then your editor's hat is the more obviously critical, logical. And so switching between the two can take you out of flow. Some people can do it, but I think for the majority, it's like, just write, get it all out. It doesn't matter if it's not in the right order. It doesn't matter if it's spelt wrong. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because it can all be altered. It can all be changed. Just get it out of you, and then we can work on it.
Yeah. And I got it out of me.
You did.
That first draft, I remember also like sending you, you know, like signing the contract essentially with you on the day that Mercury came out of retrograde, because at the time I was working with another friend, Dawn, a mutual friend, Dawn, and she'd been, you know, giving me some astrological advice on, like, you know, things that were going on, and there was this date coming up that felt really potent, and I'm like, I'm going to wait till that day, and it was only like 3 days away from when we'd spoken, and I'm like, right, this is the day that it's going to start. And that was the day it started. And it was that day that I literally started writing. I'm like, right, I'm just gonna do it and go for it. And whilst I say now that it all just came out, and I wrote it, was about 8 weeks, 10 weeks, something like that, 12 weeks. Something like that.
About that, yeah.
Yeah. I remember it being between two Mercury retrogrades, and that wasn't really done on purpose, but I finished it. We'll talk about how I finished it probably as well. But I remember finishing it and thinking, oh my God, like Mercury's just about to go into its like shadow or into its stationary phase. And I was like, this is weird, right? So it came out quite quickly, but you'll remember the journey that, and I didn't share it. I didn't really talk to anybody about what I was going through. I kind of keep it really personal. Is this my Wi-Fi that's gone nuts? Yes.
Yeah.
It's my Wi-Fi that's gone nuts. Well, hopefully it will be all right. Yeah, I was keeping it really personal. I wasn't really talking to anyone about it. I didn't really tell anyone that I was writing a book, apart from you and a couple of other people, the only people that knew, because it just felt like it needed to be quite insular. It needed to be something that was mine.
Yeah.
Didn't want to put any pressure on me. Like I said, it could have just stayed in my laptop forever. But you'll remember that there was this massive journey that happened, like as I was writing it. And I think,
yeah, absolutely.
I think anyone that's writing a book, especially if it's, I don't think even just if it's a memoir, but anyone who's writing a book that means a lot to them or that contains their own personal experience, which I'm guessing like every book contains a personal experience pretty much. The universe has this really funky way, doesn't it, of bringing everything up that you're writing about.
Oh my God, yes. And that's not just you, that's every single person that I've worked with thus far. You will be book 12 on this program, which is kind of cool. But every single person that I've worked with thus far, what they're writing about, doesn't matter what it is, starts to really show up for them in a big way in their life, because you are aligning with that space, right? So, and obviously we saw that at times with you, but it's like you are in this space. Like, for example, so my last car was a Chrysler. It's obviously an American brand. And I had never really seen a Chrysler before in this country. I'd never seen one firsthand. But when I had seen the car before I bought it, that week I must have seen about 5 or 6 on the road, because suddenly I'm in alignment with it, right? So it really does happen, which, you know, yes, if you're writing a memoir or an autobiography, you do, I feel, because it's your baby and it's precious, it's like you on the page. So I do feel like keep it close while you nurture it, like, you know, like a pregnancy. But be aware, not to say this to frighten people, but be aware that whatever you're writing is going to show up for you.
Right.
So, you know, if you are scared of, like, you know, if you're scared of the supernatural, the paranormal, maybe don't write about it.
But you say that, right? But the stuff that I wrote about was stuff that I was scared about. It was things, you know, that I'd gone through, often very privately and often just in my own head. And, you know, the things that, as I discovered things, there was the outside me, that this mask of me that was like, this is what I portray, and this is what I know, and this is what I allow others to see, especially early on in my journey. And the book was all of the unmasking of all of that and all of the stuff that was going on behind my head when I was discovering these things and learning about these things and these massive like topics and these huge philosophies. And I was kind of there, you know, on the one hand talking about them, sharing about them, you know, going, oh, look at this cool thing about the law of attraction and all these things that we can manifest. And in the background, I was worried about manifesting earthquakes and basically screwing my life up because there was a, you know, there was a darkness that sat underneath there that I didn't let anybody else see. And so in my book, when I'm writing about that and it's covering up, and then suddenly the universe is like literally showing me, like in mirror, everything that everything that I'm uncovering, unraveling. And that was not easy all of the time.
No, absolutely not. I think, you know, in part, not all sections, but I think in part it was almost, to some degree, some shadow work for you going through certain sections. I know that as you got to the back end of the book and the things that you were talking about there, that was not easy for you to write. And we had several conversations about should you and how could you do this, and you wanted to do it justice, but you did, like, it was really like an overthinking space because of the stuff that you were talking about and what it potentially could bring up. So I get that totally. I think, like I say, writing is a real journey, and what I witnessed for you was that the more you wrote, it found like you became quite confident in your voice. So then there was a need then to go back to the start of the book again and almost edit it, not necessarily obviously while you were in writing, but at some point you had to go back and being like, yeah, my voice has changed since I wrote this, you know, and that's perfectly normal.
Yeah. It was interesting when I finally read it back, because also not many people know this, right? So I finished in the I started in the October, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I finished in the December. I think that's what it was. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then I closed my laptop down. I'm like, oh, I'm finished. And it was fine. We'll talk later how it finished. It finished. And then I did not read it. I did not open it. And I was like, I need to read it. And a few people said to me, this is where the hard bit starts. And I'm like, how is this the hard bit? I've done the thing. It's read, it's finished. But I didn't open it. I like wouldn't read it. It was like a part of me was terrified.
I remember it well.
You're like, how you getting on? I'm not read it. And I'm like,
I was like, I swear at one point you were just like completely ghosting me because I was like, hey Melissa, how are things? I was like, leave me on red. I was like, oh, she is just not in a good space right now.
I'm not. I'm embarrassed. And this was the thing, like I felt like I don't know, there was like I kind of felt ashamed. I was like, why aren't I looking at this? And you know, I was seeing my energy healer, my energy worker at the time, and I'd talk about the book and he'd say, so how's the book going? Because he could see in me the energy that was held in this book. And I'm like, I've still not read it. He's like, why not? I'm like, I don't know, I've still not read it. And then something interesting happened because the stars had literally aligned with this book. I remember I was going on holiday and I was like, well, I'm going to read it when I'm away. I'll be by the beach, I'll have time, I haven't got anything else distracting. But when in the skies, what was going on, because I love to book a holiday when it's Mercury retrograde, Mercury went back again. And I was like, well, this is perfect. Yeah. I wrote the whole book as this, you know, the planet of communication was moving forward. And then I was reviewing it during the most potent time to review and to go back. And a friend of mine had read it as well, and she'd given me some notes on what she felt with the book, and that was really helpful as well. And I went back and read it, and I was like, oh, it's actually quite good. I was reading it going like, I don't remember writing it, most of this. Like, who wrote this? Like, is this me? And that was really interesting for me.
It was, because it almost, I think at certain points there was like different versions of you coming through, right? And I know that I can talk to you about this stuff because you get it, because I think at certain times there was you, Melissa, sitting here now, but then there's at times there was like, it was more your higher self coming through.
Yeah.
At times there was more of a shadow wanting to come through. I could feel that. And there was even a bit of inner child in there. Like, there was all these different aspects and all these different voices that were all you, but almost like aspects of you. And giving them a voice and giving them space meant that, I'm sure when you read it, it was a little bit like a surprise in the nicest possible way.
It was definitely a surprise.
Yeah.
And I was super critical of it, because
I remember.
I'm a perfectionist. Even though I'm a Piscean and I like to go with the flow in most of my things, my Virgo rising is a perfectionist. It's like this inner part of me is such a like, well, I want it all to be perfect. And you were like, oh, it's really good. And I was like, I just didn't believe you. I actually didn't believe you.
You didn't. No. You thought I was just being nice and stroking your ego. And I'm like, no, genuinely, this is really good.
I was like, no way. And then a couple of other friends read it and they're like, it's really good. And I'm like, I still don't believe any of you. I was like, why can't anyone tell me the truth? I remember saying that. I was like, why is no one telling me the truth? And then another friend read it and I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's quite good. But then I went back and I edited and I brought more to it and more, the confidence, I think, with the writing that I started to feel towards the end of it. And at that point, I knew it was going to come out in the world. It couldn't now just stay on my laptop, because now people knew when I finished the book, right? It was like a week or two before I finished the book, I actually came out and told people that I was writing it. And I'm like, it's going to be out very soon. 9 months ago. Yeah, soon. And I've done it and I've written a book. It's amazing, all this stuff. And I was like, yeah. And so I think when I came back, I was like, well, I know that it is going out in the world. And now I really need to make sure that this isn't just a self-indulgent project of me writing for my healing and for my understanding, for my perspective, and from a sense of wanting to get this thing out of me, that there was a compulsion when I was writing it and it had to get out. When it came back to the second edit or first edit, I was like, right, I know this is going to be out in the world, and now I need to make sure that it holds the message and the understanding and that it lands, and it's not just my voice, but it's my voice and my higher self's voice, and my voice of who I was 10 years ago, because that might be for some of my readers where they are. And that was super interesting. So 4 edits later, I think we're on.
But it happens because, like you say, the whole thing was to make it the best it could possibly be, and to honor your story, and to honor the process, and to honor the book, and to honor you. Like, it was really important, not just for you, both of us, like I say, have gone on this space together, and it was important that we made it to the end and made, this book is incredible, and I'm really excited to people get to finally read it, because it's been a journey, but my God, we have created something fantastic from that space. And I read a statistic last year that blew my mind. Only 3% of books that are ever started to be written end up being published. 3%, right? Now think about the British Library. Think about Waterstones. Think of all the books there are in the world. That's the 3%. Can you imagine how many books there would be if everybody who started writing actually published? And I was adamant you were going to be in the 3%. I kept saying to you, if I have to get in my car and drive down to your house and kick your ass, you're finishing this book.
Yeah. 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 And I don't know. I think if I was left to my own devices, maybe I don't know, it'd probably still be in my laptop at the minute.
It would. Absolutely. People do it. I mean, years ago, I've written 9 books of my own. And my first ever book was back in 2013. And my mum, being my mum, she wanted to have the printed manuscripts. I didn't have a printer at the time, so I had to go to the library and hog the printer. And which went down well, but the librarian was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I've written my first book." And she went, "Oh wow, what's it about?" So I told her, and she went, "I'm writing a book." And so she told me about her book, and I was like, "Well, you should finish it, that's a great thing." Came back like 16 months later to print out my second one. She was like, "Don't tell me you've written your second book." I went, "Yeah." And she went, "I haven't even finished writing my first one." I'm like,
yeah,
you don't want to be one of those people where it becomes like full of regret and shame, really, of like you haven't followed through. And yet it's not an easy thing to do. Sometimes it's really hard, but God, it is worth it. There's no magic like holding your own book in your hands. It's beautiful.
Right. Yeah, and my mum cried when my sample copy just came through, by the way. Yeah, you know, it's not, I didn't realize the bit I thought would be difficult I found easy, and the bits that I thought would be easy I found hard, which was a real surprise for me. It's like right now I'm as equally as terrified as I am excited, and I'm terrified about things that if you asked me at the beginning what would I be terrified about, I don't think I'd have landed where I am now. It's like this book for me is so personal. It's like, I think while you're writing it, it's like, well, I want it to come to you. I want to be able to do it. I want to get it finished. And then it's like, well, now I want to get it right. And I want to make sure that it's all like, not perfect, but, it's got the energy behind it, and it's got the feeling, and it's got the understanding, and it reads well. And then there's, so I've been doing the last few weeks, making sure grammatically it's all okay, and that it looks really good, and all of this stuff. And the front cover, Rebecca, who's been working on front cover, has done like an exceptional job. Like, I'm so
amazing front cover. It's gorgeous.
Right. And it's like there's all of these steps, and now I'm like, whoa, I'll tell you what I'm scared of, and this is weird, I think. Well, it's not weird, but this is where I am. It's like I'm not scared that it's not going to sell, because if it sells, it sells, and if it doesn't, the book's actually done for me what I needed the book to do for me. It's this thing of like, oh my God, people are going to really know me. People are going to read this book and they're going to know who I am, and I don't even know who they are. And the people will be like, oh, like I think of books I've read, and I think like I know them, and I've never met them before in my life.
Yeah,
I may never meet them in my life. Yeah, I feel like there's a depth of knowing to them, and I've always been so private and things very personal, and just aware of how I put myself forward. And it's almost like all of that has just dropped as my internet drops, my veil dropped. And and it's kind of,
no, it is, and it's like you okay, we're back. So I was going to say, one of the real magic things is, I think it's about shifting your perspective, Melissa, genuinely, rather than seeing it as, like, I'm coaching you now, rather than seeing it as like people will know you personally, and that's like feels quite vulnerable, which I think is normal in the space that you're at. You're about to birth your first book. It's about to have your first baby. You feel very vulnerable right now, right? You're nesting down, right? But think about it this way. You know, one of the chapters is The Teacher Awakens. Your book is going to help people, and you will never know. You don't know how many people are going to read your book. You don't know how your book is going to help them. You don't know at what far corners of the world your book is going to reach. This is part of your mission. This is part of your purpose. This is part of you being that light and that teacher and that force of love in the world, is that through the ripple effects of what the work that we do, we help people in the best way that we can, but we're not always aware of who they are or how we help them. It's enough to know that you do.
Right. And that is the energy that's going to make me hit publish when we finish this call, because apparently it takes 3 days. Yeah. And it's funny you say that, but you know this because you've read the book. You may or may not remember, I talk about in the book an Akashic journey that I had, one of the first Akashic journeys that I had before I had any concept of the thought of being a teacher. And in that moment, I saw where I thought in that life I'd wasted it. And then it was somebody coming and going, because of you, I did this. And I just got goosebumps again. And I remember then, like at the time, I didn't grasp the potency of that. And again, it was looking back. And as I kind of went in that space, and it all came flooding back. Like, obviously I have my notes from when I done that journey, but while I was writing, it all came flooding back. And this energy of this spirit person who had come to me on that night was there going like, hello, look how much you helped me. And it was like, okay. And it was that energy that when I was like, do I share this? Do I share this depth? And I heard your voice going, just write and edit it later. And I was thinking, well, I'll write it. I can always take it out. We're going to take it out. And I didn't take anything out. I added things, but I didn't take anything out in the edits. And even sometimes I was reading it, I was like, ooh, that feels very personal. But we're going to put it there anyway. We're just going to, and I hope you both have healing as past life healers, Antonio has said. Yeah, so it's definitely been a journey, and I think the journey is going to continue. And as I hear people reading it, which I hope it will. Well, let's talk about when I sent it to some people that I really, admire, and people, friends and mentors and authors that I really admire. And then they come back and they're like, I love it. I was like, oh my God.
I mean, I felt like a proud mother. I really did. I was like, every time you messaged me and was like, this person loved it and this person's gonna give me a quote and I was just like, I got quite emotional because I was just like so proud of you. I thought, God, what? Not that we need external validation, because we shouldn't really need it, but it's nice, isn't it? And to get like your peers and the people that you have admired, the people who have inspired you, to give you that validation and to give you that confirmation that you're doing something that's powerful and beautiful. I mean, it was just, I was over the moon for you. It was like another level. I was just like,
and for me, it was this big remembrance, like to do things, like even when your knees are knocking, like just to like, because okay, so my internet's gone again. It keeps going at these like epitome moments. There was Blue Marsden, who's the creator of Soul Plan, and I was like, why would you want to read my book? But there was this real thing, like, because I mentioned Soul Plan and how it assisted me in the book, and I've been working with him with my psychotherapy training and my counseling training, and he is all about the story of our lives and our soul destinies and all of these things. There was this energy like, oh, I can't, how could I possibly ask him? He's a busy man. And, but I was like, I just felt this like, no, I think that it felt right. And even though I was scared, it felt right. And it was the same energy that some of the people that, you know, have heard me speak before, when I said to Kyle Gray, when I was having a reading with him like years ago, and I had this feeling, I was like, oh, I want to tell him that I've got this vision that I'm going to be on stage with him. And I was like, I'm not going to swear, but I was very scared. Not scared, but I was a bit like, how can I say this? But there was this energy that I started to recognize as something. And I said it to him, and then that, you know, that led on to great things. And then when I was at a workshop a few weeks ago with Robert Holden, and there was all these weird synchronicities coming up to it, and I was like, there's something here, that this isn't just that I'm here for this. There's something here that I'm here for a reason. And we were talking, and I was just like, mention your book, and I was like, I can't mention my book, he's not going to care. And I said to him, like, would you you know, be really honored, like, I said to him, I'm writing a book, and could you possibly maybe just read like 3 words of it? No, can you, like, if I send you a few chapters and like you can see? And he went, Melissa, send me the whole book. And I was like, oh my God. And I did. And then he emailed me back this really nice, supportive, like genuine email. And it was on the day that I'd finished reading his book, Higher Purpose, which is a great book. And that whole book, I felt like he was talking to me, because he talks about writing as well, and what the writing process. And I was just like, oh my God, like this, he talks about the golden thread that runs through our life, which I talk about the golden thread that runs through our life. And I was like, it was all just very synchronistic. And for me, it's, you know, it's not just, oh, wow, I've got this quote from Robert Holden, which is like incredible. It's also a message for us all that it doesn't matter who we are. Like for me, when I just see myself as just like a regular girl who lives just outside of London with her 3 boys and her husband, doing the things that she does. And then, you know, and I look at someone like that who I see as so inspiring and so incredible, that like, if it can happen to me, it can happen to you. And that all of our messages are just as important.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You know, there's this thing that I've really noticed, and more so in the spiritual community perhaps. So now with social media, you really see it, and it's really playing out this week as well. You know, that we put people on pedestals. We look up to people so much, and they were so inspiring and so amazing in our eyes that we see them as somehow better than us. But actually, and I had my own podcast interview yesterday with a wonderful woman, and I was saying that basically every single person is next to you in line. Because so Melissa, for example, has great knowledge, experience, skills, attributes. Like, you know, there is a lot that she can do. And you know, she's not Wonder Woman though. She can't do everything. I'm sorry, Melissa, you know it's true. So there are people watching this that you can do things. You can do things if you're watching this. It's not that she and so yes, it's wonderful to have this